Good morning, everybody. This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayeshev. Vayeshev on your Parsha fact says it's in the book of Bereshis, book of Genesis, chapter 37, verse 1 through 40. It's in your handy art scroll, page 198. It has 112 verses. There are no commandments in it. None of the 613 commandments are there. So, as an introduction to the Parsha, I just want to relate a concept that we're going to be talking about, and that's the concept of Midah Keneged Midah, which means measure for measure. That God sometimes rewards and punishes measure for measure, meaning to say that if somebody does X, something, there'll be a payback that is similar to what the person did. I'm going to give you a very sweet, positive example of it. Jewish law dictates that when a person is a mourner, that means mourning for a lost loved one the first 7 days, which means a close relative, husband, wife, mother, father, brother, sister, son, or daughter. That one of the things the mourner does is that he or she does not wear leather shoes. And they're usually going around without shoes. Anyone heard of this idea before? Some of them are familiar with this idea? It's part of the mourning process. We're not going to get into it now. It's part of the mourning process. Leather shoes are comfortable, and that's what they do. So there was a man who felt badly for mourners that he would go visit. And he had his own custom. This is not, no one does this, but he had his own custom that he would take off his shoes when he came into the house of a mourner, that he would sort of say, I'm with you in your pain. You can't wear shoes, I'm not going to wear shoes either. That was his custom. Again, there's no custom like that. There's no law to do that. So don't take off your shoes when you go to a mourner's house. But this is what he did. And there was an interesting thing that happened. On the 9th day of Av, the Hebrew month of Av is Tisha B'Av, we mourn the destruction of the temple. And the entire Jewish population doesn't wear leather shoes that day. Because we're mourning the destruction, that we don't have a temple. So this man who had the custom of, he happened to pass away, his funeral was on Tisha B'Av. So he didn't wear shoes, so now no one wore shoes by his funeral. So God sort of worked it out that he got a little bit of a acknowledgement for the sweet custom that he instituted for himself. All right, so that's a positive example of measure for measure. Is everyone following what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Now, again, the Almighty is the ultimate CPA, and when I say CPA, I don't mean certified public accountant. I mean celestial payback accountant. That's how I interpret CPA for God. He's the ultimate CPA, celestial payback accountant, because he has his calculations on this is what the person did then, so that's what's going to happen now. Now, again, this is a longer discussion, which you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. There's no guarantee that things work this way. For example, a person may have made a mistake and then did tshuva, repented on it, so that would erase the payback, the negative payback, right? So I'm just telling you the concept because it is going to come up in this week's portion. And if we have time, I'll tell you another more modern version of the payback, which is a possibility just. Okay. So in Parshas Vayeshev, the end of Parshas Vayishlach talks about last week's portion. The end of the portion is the offspring of Esav. And and this week's portion deals with the counterweight of Yaakov and his children. Now, I do want to mention, we did talk about that Yaakov's name was adjusted, if you will, that occasionally he's not only going to be called Yaakov, he's going to be called Yisrael, Israel. That's where we get the idea of we are Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, and the land is Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. What's the change of name mean? The change of name means an adjustment of greatness. So we have Avram was Avram, and he became Avraham. Sarai was Sarai, became Sarah, right? And Yaakov is sometimes called Yisrael. And that indicates an expansion of purpose. And that's why having a Hebrew name is an important idea. If someone does not have a Hebrew name yet, we can work on that with you. No problem, because that's a good thing to have. So the parsha begins that Yaakov hoped to live. He had not such an easy life till now, and he hoped that now things would settle down, but that wasn't what was meant to happen. And it's important for us to realize that being good doesn't mean things are going to always be peachy. Doesn't mean things are always going to work out. I had a man many years ago who said to me he wasn't raised religious. He got a little bit more involved in Judaism, and then he tells me he doesn't want to be religious anymore. I said, why not? He said, because I thought I'd become religious, then I'd get a better job, and good things would happen to me. I said, you're right, you shouldn't be religious. He was like, well, what do you mean? He says, you basically figured out that if I do the good things, God's going to pay me back the way I want, when I want. And that's not how it works. God does pay back, but it's on his timetable, not our timetable, and not in the ways that you necessarily think. So we're going to see that Yaakov has some real challenges in his life, and so does Yosef, as we're going to see. Now, Yaakov had 12 sons and one daughter, but he had a very special relationship with Yosef. Why Yosef? Number one, had he married Rachel, Yosef would have been the Bechor, the firstborn. Had Lavan not tricked him and switched Leah instead of Rachel, Yosef would have been the first child that he had, and he would have been the Bechor, the firstborn of the entire family. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, okay? If I'm giving information that you're missing a piece, let me know. So he was, if you will, the firstborn from his primary and favorite wife, Rachel, okay? Number two, they looked alike. Number three, there was some parallels of what happened in their life, as we're going to see. We're going to find that both of them had dreams. Yaakov had the dream with the ladder going up to heaven, and we're going to find that in this week's portion, Yosef had dreams. We're going to find that Yosef's brothers didn't like him, just like Yaakov had a brother that didn't like him. We're going to talk about that as well. And he had great qualities, and he was destined for greatness. And Yaakov taught him a lot of Torah, and he gave him a beautiful, colorful coat. And sages in the Talmud teach us, don't show preference for one child over the other. Make all children feel special. And why is that? You don't want jealousy. You don't want them to be jealous. Now, I have to be very clear. That doesn't mean that you treat each child equally. Every child needs their own. There's a famous saying from Proverbs from King Solomon that explains volumes of how to raise children. It says, "Chanoch lenar al pi darko," raise a child according to his way, which means you have to adjust. Every child is different, and you can't do the exact same thing to every child. I used to tell my kids, here at the school, the girls are off on Sunday, and the boys do have yeshiva on Sunday morning. So the boys say, it's not fair, we want to be off too. I said, you know what, if you put on a skirt and you go to the girls' school, you'll be off on Sunday too. No. Okay, it doesn't have to be fair. It doesn't have to be equal, but it can be fair. So that's something, it's a balancing act that we as parents do. Some children need more, and some children can manage with less. So again, there's an adjustment that needs to be made many times, depending on the needs of the child. Everyone with me with the concepts? If there's a question, don't hesitate. Yosef, because he had this unique relationship, by the way, interestingly enough, both Yaakov and Yosef ended up dying in Egypt at different times, but they both died in Egypt. So that's another parallel between Yaakov and Yosef. Yosef reported things that he saw his brothers doing that he felt were wrong. And he said, we are introduced to the mitzvah, the prohibition of speaking lashon hara, speaking ill about others. We're not supposed to speak ill. We're not supposed to speak about others. Now, his intention, though he was righteous, his intention was very good. He felt that the father should know, so he would chastise them for the mistakes that they made. And he said things like, he thinks that they're eating animals without ritual slaughter. He said that they're not treating the children of Bilhah and Zilpah, which were the maidservants, they're not treating them well. They're not behaving well with Canaanite women. Now, what did he do wrong? This is what he saw, and he complained to his father. What should he have done differently? So, very good. One concept is go straight to the person himself and talk to them about it. And they could have clarified that he's mistaken about what he's seeing. And then there's another important concept, which is the concept of being done l'kav zchus, judging favorably. You see something doing wrong, first judge favorably. Maybe it's not, maybe you don't know the circumstance. There's a sweet, yes?
I want to ask about lashon hara.
Is it good, lashon hara?
If you tell a story, what happened, true story.
Yes.
This considered lashon hara?
Yes.
Why?
Because it's not about if it's true. Is it important to know this information? Does anybody benefit from it by hearing this information?
What if just for fun? What happened?
We can't have fun at somebody else's expense.
I don't understand.
Yeah, but sometimes
I'll say it again. You can't have fun at somebody else's expense.
But it happened in front of you.
Yeah, lashon hara is true. There's another prohibition, Motzi Shemra, saying a lie about somebody. Even if it's a true story, why do we want to embarrass a person or harm the person?
Nothing bad.
What if you're trying to protect yourself or somebody though?
So, like I said, there has to be with the laws of lashon hara we're going to get to, God willing, in a few months. But at least a little bit of it. If there's a purpose for it, let me give you an example. The person worked for you, and now he's applying for a job someplace else, and the person was a thief.
Yes.
Right, or they cheated, right? So the person's asking you. This person is asking you, should I hire this person? So then,
This is different.
what's the difference? There you're allowed to say, because that's relevant. But if it's not relevant, what's the purpose? Because I have to tell you, Eleanor Roosevelt said a great line. She said, great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. If we just,
But it's good people. Everything that's going on, it's good.
but if we talk about people, if you go to your friend and say, oh, I have a coworker in the office and she steals paper and pens from the office every day. Unbelievable. Does that friend need to know that?
Yes,
Why?
because it harms the.
But that person,
Business.
right, but that's not to the friend. That's the boss. Don't tell the friend. That's what I'm saying. So, all right. So judging favorably is a very important idea. And we're going to find that because Yosef didn't do this, there's going to be a measure for measure against Yosef for this, even though, again, he was a righteous person. So, though they were righteous, the brothers disliked him. Number one, he would say bad things about them to their father. Number two, he got preferential treatment from Avram. But at least they were honest with him. They didn't make believe they were friendly with him. They were echad b'pev, echad b'leiv. They were united. They didn't like him, and they were very open about that, and didn't make believe they were his best friend. Yosef has a dream, and the dream is that the brothers are cutting sheaves of wheat, and they're in the field and they're cutting sheaves of wheat, and the bundles of wheat arise in the sky and bow down to Yosef's sheaf. And Yosef shares this dream with his brothers. Were the brothers happy? Why not?
No.
It's younger than them, and the thought that the older.
That they would be bowing to him was very unnerving to them. What is he saying here? Now, his intention was to say these are not staying dreams. These are dreams of maybe prophecy, that I have a leadership role. But they didn't interpret it that way, and they were not happy with him with that dream. And they asked him, are you going to rule over us? That's what you think? Then he had another dream. And this other dream was the sun and the moon and the stars bow down to Yosef. And he told it to his father as well, and to the brothers, and the brothers were really upset. And the father, because it was the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing down. So the father said, like, what are you talking about? And he felt it wasn't right. One of the reasons he felt it wasn't right is, who would the sun be?
Yeah.
Yaakov. Who would the moon be? The mother, right? His mother wasn't alive anymore. Rachel wasn't alive anymore. So there seemed to be a flaw in the story. Now, it could be Bilhah, the maidservant, that took over. But at the same time, Yaakov chastised him. At the same time, Yaakov is a little suspicious. Is there something about these dreams that I wonder if this is going to come true? There's something here, something going on. And Yosef's brothers are pasturing the father's sheep in Shechem, and Yaakov sends Yosef to find out how they're doing. And he can't find them. There's an angel there. The angel Gabriel meets him and tells him asks him what you're looking for. He tells them where to go. And they see Yosef coming. The brothers see Yosef coming, and they make a court, and they rule that Yosef should be killed. Why do they think they should kill him? So I'll give you one insight. How many children did Avram have? Initially, 2, Yishmael and Yitzchak. Who carried the mantle of the Jewish people? Only Yitzchak, right? How many children did Yitzchak have? 2, Yaakov and Esau, right? Right? Who carried the mantle of the Jewish people? Only Yaakov, right? The tribes were afraid that Yosef was cutting them out. That just like Avram had one heir apparent and Yitzchak had one heir apparent, Avram had Yitzchak and Yitzchak had Yaakov, with Yosef treating them the way he was and talking about his dreams, they were afraid that he was trying to make it that there'd only be one heir apparent and they would be cut out. So they said it's better that there'll be 11 tribes than there'd be only one. Okay, everyone hear the thought process? And they ruled that he should be killed. And they had a plot to kill him. And he comes, they grab him. But Ruvain says, why should we have our blood on our hands? Let's throw him into the pit. And the pit that was deep and unbeknownst to them had snakes and scorpions in it. And Ruvain's plan was that he would come back later to save him. So they put him into the pit, and Reuven heads back to the dad. They take off the coat. Yosef begs them to please let me go, and they don't. And Yehuda came up with a different idea. Why should we have blood on our hands at all? There's some people traveling by. Let's sell Yosef as a slave. And the brothers like that idea, and they pull him out of the pit, and he's sold into slavery, heading down to Egypt. And he's out of the picture. And they take the blood of this beautiful coat that he had, and they put blood on it, and they show it to Yaakov, and they say, do you recognize this? And Yaakov says, a wild animal ate him up, and he's inconsolable. He's inconsolable. He's really just totally inconsolable. Now, let's go back a little bit. I mentioned the idea of measure for measure. So first of all, Yosef said that they didn't treat the children of Bilhah and Zilpah, the maidservants, well. So now he's being sold as a slave. Yosef said that they didn't ritually slaughter properly the animals. So now blood was being put onto his garment. And there's more that's coming as well. Now Yosef was going to be gone. I'm jumping ahead a little, for 22 years. And that's how long, by the way, Yaakov was gone, not including the time that he spent studying Torah, but that was the amount of years that Yaakov was gone and didn't honor his father. So he didn't honor for 22 years. So now he has a son who's not able to honor him for 22 years. So there's a measure for measure going back and forth here a little bit, just as another example of that idea. Now, like I said, the Torah is very real. Our heroes are not, they're saints, but they're not saints that never make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and the Torah is very real and tells us about the mistakes that they made. So the tribes try to console Yaakov, but he's inconsolable. And one of the reasons he was inconsolable was he knew a prophecy that if he outlived all of his children, that means that he accomplished what he needed to do, and he created the 12 tribes. If one of the tribes died before him, he failed in that mission. So now thinking that Yosef is dead is a very, very difficult pill for him to swallow. And he was inconsolable. And by the way, I will ask you an interesting question. Is forgetting a good thing or a bad thing?
Both.
Why both?
Because if you remember too many bad things, it clouds your life.
Very good. That is correct.
But you need to replace.
Right. So it's both. Now, the Almighty makes that when a person dies, that there's an aspect of forgetfulness that comes in. It doesn't mean the person forgot about their loved one, but it's not front and center anymore. I had a personal experience with that once. Many years after my mother passed away, I had a dream that she came to me to tell me that she was alive and that there was a mistake. And I was like the happiest kid in my mind. It was like, what a great feeling. And then I woke up and I realized she was not alive. It was just a dream. And the pain that I felt then was similar to the pain I felt when I found out that she had initially passed, because in a sense she, quote, died again, right? So it's a very interesting thing. Again, I loved her dearly and I never forgot about her. But as time goes on, the Almighty gives us a gift that we're able to make room for other things in our lives and we can have a perspective. When I had that dream, it brought my mother back to the forefront, and waking up, realizing that it was just a dream, it's not true. So this is just an example of the gift of Shikha. Yaakov mourned Yosef. Why didn't he forget about him? He was still alive. Very good. He was still alive. So he didn't have the quote, the blessing of the healing of time. And he still was connected to him that way. So now we're going to talk about a different law. There's a law in the Torah called a it's called levirate marriage. What that means is as follows. We don't do this today, but the law is as follows. Let's say a person has a son named Reuven. And Reuven gets married and he passes away without children. So now Jewish law required that Shimon, the brother of Reuven, should marry Reuven's wife, so that the memory of his brother should be continued. Okay, so that's called the levirate marriage. Now, what happens if Reuven's wife doesn't want to marry him, or he doesn't want to marry her? So then there's a procedure called chalitza with a shoe, a whole procedure where saying we're not going to do this. And that's, by the way, what we do today. Nobody marries the spouse of a brother that passes without children. There's no name. Shikha is Shikha means to forget. That's what that is. It's not, it doesn't have a special name. All right. So again, there's this mitzvah in the Torah of if a son dies without children, we want to help perpetuate the name. So a brother would marry the spouse to continue the name of that son. And as I mentioned, today we don't do that. We only do the shoot proceeding to absolve the woman from having to marry the son. And so Yehuda had a son, and the wife Tamar was very beautiful, and they didn't have children. And the reason why they didn't have children is because Yehuda's son was not righteous, and he did a primitive form of birth control that he didn't allow his seed to go into his wife, and he didn't consummate the intercourse, and Hashem was not happy with him, and he passed away early because of this. So his brother married Tamar to fulfill this obligation, and he did the same thing, made the same mistake. Because again, she was very beautiful and didn't want to quote the pregnancy to quote ruin her looks. He made the same mistake, and he also died at a young age. So now Yehuda had a third son, but he didn't know the story behind it, but he wasn't so interested in having Tamar be the one who marries now the third son, because he lost two already with her. So he just says, don't call us, we'll call you, before he allows her to marry the third son. And his intention was, so he's obviously, I don't know if she's putting something in the soup. No, I'm kidding. But the bottom line is that he didn't want her to marry his third son, and she's sitting waiting. Okay. Now Yehuda was rejected by the brothers because they realized that his plan about selling him may not have been the best plan in the world, because Yaakov is inconsolable. And in the meantime, Yehuda's wife had passed away. So Tamar dresses up, disguises herself, and waits on the road where Yehuda is traveling, and makes believe that she is a prostitute. And again, there's Jewish law aspects of it that you could marry somebody for short term. I'm not going to get into the Jewish law details of it. And is intimate with Yehuda. Yehuda gives, he didn't have money on him, so he gave some personal items to her. And he said, I will pay you back. Now, she was not a, she was a righteous person, but she set Yehuda up this way. And then when Yehuda wanted to pay back the woman, she wasn't around anymore. She was gone because she didn't do this as a profession. She just wanted to entrap Yehuda. X amount of time later, Yehuda finds out that Tamar is pregnant. And he's very upset because really she's supposed to be married to his son. And if not be married, then do the procedure to disconnect her from it. And she's not allowed to be having relations with anybody else. And the judgment is that she shouldn't live because she obviously was not acting in a moral fashion. So what does she do? She doesn't hold a press conference. She doesn't embarrass him. She sends a message to Yehuda saying that the one who these things belong to, his signet ring and things that he gave her, that's who I'm pregnant from. Now, Yehuda's in a very difficult position because whose items are they? His. But Yehuda says she is righteous and I'm responsible for why she's pregnant. And I'm responsible for the whole thing because I should have let her marry the son. And now, in a sense, I did the levirate marriage with the daughter-in-law. And this idea of not embarrassing is a very powerful idea. I don't think we have time for the examples of it, but there are beautiful examples of it. And now Tamar meant it for the right reason. She meant it only because this was the right thing to do. And now Yehuda acknowledges it. And this is a big test. The test of doing the right thing when nobody would know. Had Yehuda not said anything, what would have happened? Tamar would have been killed, and that would have been the end of the story on this world. But in heaven, that would have been a very different story. And by the way, from Yehuda and Tamar will eventually be where Mashiach comes from, the Messiah. So the Medrash says a beautiful idea. The Medrash says, Yosef is, you can find it quickly, I'll tell you the language. I don't remember the exact language, something like Yaakov is busy mourning Yosef. Yosef is in jail, and God is planning the future redemption of the Jewish people. Because from this relationship from Yehuda and Tamar, that's where eventually the offspring will come, King David will come, and the Messiah will come. So Yosef is taken down to jail. Not taken to jail, he's taken down and becomes a servant in the house of Potiphar. And Yosef is there, and the wife, and he's talking about God all the time. He's very successful, and he's using God's name, Baruch Hashem, thank God, Emir Hashem, God willing. He's using God all the time. And eventually, he's in charge of the house. And the wife of Potiphar, his boss, is very attracted to him. And she attempts to seduce him again and again and again, and he resists. He resists her advances. So much so that one time she feigns being sick, and she's in the house. Nobody is home, and Yosef comes to work, and she grabs him. And he was very handsome, Yosef, and she grabs him, and he runs outside without his clothing, and she is upset that he did that. So she says, "Help, help!" And Yosef is arrested because she says that he attacked her, and Yosef is put into jail. So the situation went from bad to worse. He's sold down the river by his brothers. He ends up being a servant in somebody's house. The wife attempts to seduce him, and he resists, which is looked upon as a tremendous level of spirituality. Like, he was all by himself, and he still managed, and nobody would have known except for God, obviously. So, and he resisted her, and now he ends up in jail for doing the right thing. So in jail again, he continues to talk about God, and he's successful, and he's helping the jail keeper. And he comes in one day, and now I just want to point out, life is full of tests, and that's the condition of being on this world. The best idea is to avoid tests in the first place. Avoid putting ourselves in difficult situations. Rather than saying, wow, I'll put myself in a test, and if I survive, I'll be really holy. Better not put yourself in a place of tests in the first place. That's the more righteous thing to do. Just as an aside, the law required me to have a fire door in my office so that if there's a fire would break out, it would contain it. It didn't have a window, but I meet with men and women all the time, many times privately. So I made them put in a window in the door so that people can walk by, and there's no issue. I avoid the potential problems of what that might be. So Yosef is in jail, and one fine day, the head waiter of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is serves him wine, and there's a fly in the wine. Pharaoh is very, very upset and throws the head waiter into jail. There's a head baker, and he serves a bread with a little rock in it. Pharaoh is very upset and throws him into jail. We could discuss whether or not that's the right punishment, but that's what he did. And he put him into jail. And Yosef is friendly to everybody in jail. And one day he comes in and he sees that the head waiter is sad and the head baker is sad. And he does something that's important for us to learn. You see somebody going through a hard time, ask, what's going on? Can I help? And he does. Even though, again, a lot of times we're mired in our own sorrow, he had a lot to be sorry about, right? But he thought about other people, and he went and he asked them what's going on. And they said, we each had a dream, different dreams, and we don't know what it means. And Yosef says, God has many interpretations. Tell me, maybe I can help you. So the head waiter says the dream of that there were 3 vines growing and they matured, and he was able to squeeze out the cup of wine, and he serves it to Pharaoh. And Yosef says that dream means that in 3 days, that's what the 3 vines represent. In 3 days, you're going to be taken out of jail and given back your position with the Pharaoh. He's happy. And Yosef says to him, but please make sure when this happens, make sure to tell Pharaoh that I interpreted the dream, that it came true the way I said. The head baker is very excited, and he says, let me tell you my dream. I had a dream that I had 3 baskets on my head with all different kind of delicious baked goods, and birds are coming and eating eating the baked goods from in my basket. And Yosef says, not such a good dream. The dream is that in 3 days you're going to be taken out of jail, you're going to be hung, and the birds are going to be on your head. 3 days go by, it's Pharaoh's birthday, and just as Yosef predicted, the head waiter gets back his job, and the head baker is unfortunately killed. But the head waiter doesn't do what he's supposed to do. He forgot all about Yosef and doesn't mention anything that he interpreted the dream. And Yosef is still stuck, languishing in prison. And that's the end of the story. So I'll conclude with a very interesting statement from our sages. Satan tells us that after a person leaves this world, he'll be brought before a heavenly tribunal. And a person will say, they'll be asked, why did you not study Torah? Says, well, I was very poor. What should I have done? I had to support my family. I didn't have time to do any Torah study. And they're going to say to him, were you poorer than Hillel? Hillel was so poor, he earned almost nothing. And he used half of it to be able to pay the guard at the study hall so that he could study Torah. So if Hillel would manage and it was such a pauper, you should have also managed. Someone said, a very rich man is said, after 120 he'll be asked, how come you didn't study Torah? He says, well, I was busy with my businesses. I had so many things to do. I didn't have time to study. He says, were you wealthier than Rabbi Lezer ben Charson? He possessed thousands of villages of land and thousands of ships at sea, but he never knew what they looked like because he didn't spend time. He'd spend time studying. A sensuous person was asked, what's happened learning Torah? What should I have done? I'm handsome and I was unable to control my passions. How could I have done it? So he says, your excuse is not accepted because Yosef was like that and he resisted. So the bottom line is that we each have to work on our excuses about we have to work on our excuses about not doing the right thing, and we all have good excuses, but the excuses are weak because there were great people in history that had greater temptations in their life, poor, rich, sensuous, or whatever it might be, and they managed to still do the right thing. So that we're encouraged to do the same as well. All right. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? And again, the story ends with them being freed, but Yosef's still stuck in jail, and life is going on. Any questions or thoughts or comments? Going once. I'll tell you a beautiful story. I'll just end off with not embarrassing somebody. A great sage would leave money at a poor person's house, and the poor man was very appreciative, but he wanted to know who it was. But they didn't want to stay around to wait to. They didn't want them to see. They didn't want him to be embarrassed. So when he one day was waiting for them, and when they put the money down by his door, he started opening the door to see who it was. They ran away, and he gave chase. So they ran into a bakery and hid in the oven. And the great rabbi's feet was getting burnt, and his wife's were not. So she said, "Put your feet on mine." And the poor man didn't find them, so that he wasn't embarrassed. But he asked her, how come your feet were getting burned and why did my feet get burned? So he said, because you do loving kindness by giving the money, I do loving kindness by actually giving them the food. When people come to the house, I give them the food. So my loving kindness was greater than yours, so therefore I merited not to have my feet be burnt. Pretty strong stuff. All right, so a lot of important lessons from the parsha. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Have a great week. Next Sunday night, God willing, take a flyer. There's also candles for Shabbos. Next Sunday night will be stories and customs of Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Please join us. You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye, honey.
Thanks, Rabbi
Thank you, Rabbi
Czapnik. Hi.
Czapnik.
Okay.
Sorry, I
Take
was so
care.
late.
Hi, Bracha.
Me
I'm
too.
so,
Yeah.
so late.
I'm sorry.
I missed the whole class. I was so
You missed
late.
the class. My lawyer will be contacting you.
Okay.
You
I'm
get
not
a-
gonna answer my phone.
You have to answer your phone?
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay, fine. All right.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very
Bye.
welcome.
Thank
Take
you.
care, brother.
Bye.
Take care, honey. All the best.
Bye.